Hello, my name is Christy Dentry and welcome to Valley to Vietnam. Valley to Vietnam is a joint effort between the Sacramento Public Library and the Vietnam Veterans of America Chapter 500. It is our intent to trace the arc of experience between Sacramento and Vietnam for our local Vietnam-era vets. So, I'm welcoming William Easy Smith today with us of the 27th Infantry Regiment Wolfhounds. So, thank you for your service and welcome.
Thank you.
So we're going to start at the very beginning. You were born in Washington, D.C., and at the age of 19, you were drafted in 1966 and sent to Fort Bragg, North Carolina for basic training. Could you tell me a little bit about your experiences, in particular some adversity that you may have faced?
Well, we once we got to North Carolina, we had, we couldn't go anywhere for the first couple of weeks or whatever, and we got our first weekend pass, and we went to the town of Fayetteville, and we went into groups, because one thing that was significant about that time was that there was no skin color as far as soldiers went. There's no mention of that, no worry about that. So we went to the town of Fayetteville, and we got there. There was about 15 of us, and we split up into groups. And the group I was with, we went into this pool hall, and we were rejected in the pool hall. And the guys came out, and they, sort of like ran us off, wanted to fight. So we left, and we went and found a policeman. We told the policeman about it, and the policeman told us, says, well, what do you want to do? And we told him we felt like just going back and having it out with him. So the policeman said, okay, but I'm not going to look if you do something like that. So we went back, and we got into a brawl with the guys in town, We learned later that was because, being a military town, their fear was that the soldiers would come along, or we were already taking their women. So that was that, main fear of the town, the men in the town anyway, so yeah.
From there you went to Fort Jackson, South Carolina, where you went to advanced infantry training, and then you were deployed to Vietnam on February 17th, 1967. Could you tell us a little bit about that and maybe your first duty in Vietnam?
Yeah, let's see. After, we were in AIT. One of the things I remember mostly about that was we had these drill sergeants that came up from, I guess, from Florida. They had a little Cuban in them or something, and they used to jump us, and one night, we decided to get even with them, so when they went out drinking and they got drunk, so we turned around and we ambushed them, and we kind of like gave them what they gave us, But after AIT, they gave me and my buddy Lonnie Upchurch, they gave us $3,000, and we were supposed to report to Oakland to go to Vietnam. Well, we kind of like screwed up. We spent the money riding around Washington, D.C., drinking and doing stuff, and actually, now today I know it's just a way of just, relieving a particular fear, because we didn't know whether or not we would come back home or anything like that. So, we finally got to Oakland around, 11th of February, because my brother helped us get some new money and new orders. He was a sergeant major at Fort Myer, Virginia, working in a credit union. He was in the reserves. So we got to Oakland, and then we were supposed to get on the plane to go to Vietnam. And naturally, everybody got on the plane when we finally left. It was about the 15th of February. We finally left, and the reason we left, our orders were the way they were was because my brother was born the same day I am, February 7th. So he made sure that I didn't go on my birthday. So, but I had turned 21, and we got on the plane. We flew to Vietnam. We got to Vietnam. We got landing in Ton Son Nhut. Ton Son Nhut was under attack. It was my first glimpse of the war in Vietnam when we landed in Ton Son Nhut, and then we got assigned to these little temporary units, and my first week there was I had latrine duty, and the latrines there were the kind where you wrung out the toilets, and you burnt the waste. But I had to do that for a week, and then we started getting orders to go to our different units, and we had been hearing these stories about different units, and we found out we were considered the replacements wherever we were going. And I found out I was going to the Wolfhounds, and my friend Lonnie found out he was going to the 1st Infantry Division, and he really wanted to go with me. I didn't necessarily want to go with him, but he wanted to go with me. and the same unit, but it didn't work out that way. So on the 23rd of February, we were on the truck. We went down Highway 1 and we went to Coochie. I'll never forget the smells and the stench of like what I call sand and blood mixing together. You know, it was my second, you know, real introduction to the smell of war. You know, the first was the, you know, Constantinople being an attack, that being the second. And, you know, we got early warnings about buying stuff from kids on the road and people with soda bottles and Coca-Colas, and, you know, you leave all that stuff alone. And we got to Coochie, and one thing that stands out for me was the captain, when he gave us an introduction, he told us that nobody would leave there without a Purple Heart. You know? I mean, today I joke with him, you know, about, I've, you know, emailed him a few times since we've, you know, been located him. I joke with him about why didn't he tell me I had to get two, you know, but that's later. But anyway, so.
You were in Coochie and sent into combat directly after that. Could you tell me about the first time you were wounded in Operation Junction on March 30th, 1967?
Okay. Well, the day I got to Coochie was the day after Operation Junction City had actually started. And after, you know, they give you a 5-day, you know, orientation, and after that, I don't know, within a week or so later, I was in, you know, actually in combat in the field. And somewhere around March 30th, I think it was March 30th, we were on patrol, and we entered this field, and there was nothing really there. It was rice paddies, nothing really there. I mean, I don't even think there was a Vietnamese, you know, hut or anything in the area, but there was this typewriter on the dike, on this rice paddy field, and somebody picked up the typewriter and it was booby trapped. And the one person that picked it up, I mean, he was wounded pretty badly, and they medevaced him out, and then we continued to move forward with our patrol. And while we were moving, the person walking next to me said, "Smitty, look up, man, you're bleeding," you know, and I had blood coming all out of my arms and blood out of my leg and my chest, and I didn't feel anything. And I looked up and I had shrapnel in me. So I was carrying a machine gun, and I laid it down, and I ended up calling for the medic, and they medevaced me out, and I was out for about 2 weeks.
Could you tell us a little bit about walking in a squad line and the importance of walking point? What advice did your platoon sergeant give you that you couldn't follow?
Well, walking point was, I don't know, it was one of my favorite positions. I don't know why, but I mean, that I loved it so much, except to say that I felt, you know, it was a responsibility. You know, you were the first person, but it was also a dangerous position because, you know, you're the first person that could get wounded or anything like that. And bringing up the rear was important because that person kept, you know, account of who was in front and who was in line. So those two positions were really important. Early on, my platoon sergeant always reminded us about making friends. And it was a very, very difficult thing to do because by the time it started registering or sinking in, I had already been there 2 or 3 months, you know, and he used to always say that making friends, you know, could cause you to get somebody else killed. So I had a hard time with it. Just about every time something would happen, I don't know if I could use the term get in trouble, but for lack of better words, it was always because the word friend preceded whatever I was about to do.
Could you tell us a little bit about the importance of ice in Vietnam and your famous Kool-Aid story?
Oh, ice was like a piece of ice was like a diamond in the rough. You know, I mean, we chilled out, so we rolled sodas around on it. We rolled our beer cans around in it, and I mean, if you had a piece of ice, considering how hot it was most of the time, that was a prized possession. You know. I remember one night, and I don't remember how I did part of what happened that night, but I don't remember being trained on an M60 machine gun, and I carried the M60 machine gun. And one night I had taken it apart and was cleaning it, and we got ambushed in our position. And one of the guys I knew, he got wounded, and I was, I was more pissed off at the fact that I was making Kool-Aid. And I had this big piece of ice in it in my still pot, and I was stirring it up, and then before I knew it, I realized that I had put my M60 together, and then I had to put my still pot on, but I had to throw away my Kool-Aid. I was more angry that I had to throw away my Kool-Aid than when my friend got shot.
What was your biggest fear in Vietnam? And could you tell us a story about when you were able to conquer that fear?
My biggest fear was actually had to do with water. I didn't swim then, and to this day I don't swim, but my biggest fear was water. I did not do a lot of things around water, And I remember the first time it came up that we were crossing this canal, and then I asked my platoon sergeant, I said, "You didn't tell me that the prerequisite was swimming before we got here." Right. We had to cross on ropes and stuff like that. And I crossed over, and I had my still pot on, and my still pot flipped in the back of me, and it got filled up with water, and I thought I was going to drown. I mean, I came close to calling for my mom. That's how bad it was. But on May 16th, we were out on the night patrol, and we were approaching this canal, and the platoon sergeant asked for a count, of the men. And we found out that the man bringing up the rear actually was the one who was lost. So a couple of guys went out to go look for him, and even I was starting to go look for him, but I knew I couldn't afford it because I had the machine gun, and just at that point we were ambushed. Mm-hmm. And the point man fell in the canal. He got hit and fell in the canal. And I don't know how I did it. I don't know if I jumped in the water. I don't know if I walked on water. I don't know if I dove in the water, but I actually got in there and got him and pulled him out and gave him first aid. And they say I was shooting at the enemy and dragged him back to waiting for the helicopter to come medevac him. But I did not know what I did. I do know that being around water was not so hard after that, even though I still had some fear. Mm-hmm. But the hardest part of being around the water was gone. I know a lot of that now has to do with adrenaline. I didn't know about the word adrenaline during them days, but I know a lot had to do with adrenaline. And they gave me a Bronze Star with a V for that, and V device. And sometimes people call me hero, or they call us heroes, and I'm not a hero. I'm just, it's a medal. I mean, I wear it proudly, but it's a medal.
From there, you were wounded for the second time, and you were sent to a hospital in Japan to recover. Could you tell us a little bit about your second wound and a story about Japan and the hospital there?
Okay. We were up near Tainan, and we were on patrol, and we approached this tree line. And the first two men that exited from the tree line, they were wounded. And it was a pretty heavy firefight that came after that. But the guy laying next to me, I looked at him and I said, "You know what, my friend is wounded, I got to go get him." There I go with that word friend again. I said, "I got to go get him." So I ran out to get the two men wounded. I had one of them on my shoulder, and I was shot. All I remember is, the immediate things I remember is that I looked up into the heavens, and I thought I was dead. I saw a picture of my mother, my daughter, and my first wife. And I remember the bullets flying all over my head and stuff like that. And I thought that I got, medevaced right on that spot. But I found out just in the last 4 or 5 years that that's not the way it happened. I found out that there were 2 or 3 guys that actually came out and helped me and saved my life. And I've since been in touch with those 3 guys. But the hardest part about that was that when they did medevac me, the first thing I worried about was, when I gained consciousness, was I wasn't worried about my wounds. I wanted to know what happened to the guys I was with. Because it took a long time to figure out what happened to some of them, if they lived, if they died. I didn't know. I mean, I just found out some of them died just in the last 5 years. I never knew. One of the things I had a hard time dealing with was my first sergeant came to the hospital and he brought me a duffel bag, And the duffel bag had my money that was in the safe. It had my Purple Heart, and it had a Class A uniform, dress uniform.
Mm-hmm.
Everything else I had, I never got it. You know, I mean, I had records, I had clothes, I had a turntable, I had cameras, I had pictures, all of that. I never saw it, you know. That bothered me for a real, real long time, and then I found out I was the only one that happened to. You know, it was almost like when you got wounded or you were killed, that somebody took everything of yours, and I don't think it happened with everybody, but I know it happened with me and a couple other guys that I know about today. But anyway, then they sent me to Japan, and I was in Japan on a war with about 6 guys, and my doctor, we called him McNamara because he looked just like McNamara. Yeah. So we weren't supposed to leave too far from the hospital, and I mean, most of us had wire stitches, and we were in wheelchairs, and we had catheters and whatever. And one night, out of boredom, we got this Japanese guy to come in, and we gave him about 10 or 15 bucks a piece. And we asked him to go get us some clothes, you know, specifically like a shirt and a pair of pants and some shoes and, you know, a pair of socks. He did this for 15 bucks. You know. Well, we ended up, there was 3 of us, we ended up going to town. We went to Tokyo. And that Monday morning, my doctor came in and he looked at me and asked what was wrong with me. Was I crazy? And I, what's going on? And he slaps the Stars and Stripes on the bed and he says, who do you think you are? And somebody had a picture of me on the front of Stars and Stripes dancing in a club in Tokyo. And they had, during that time, they had told me and one other guy that we weren't gonna go home. And we knew the rules were, well, I don't know if there's pulling our leg or not, but the guy that told us, you know, the particular sergeant that told us sounded pretty serious. Because we knew that part of the rules was if you got wounded twice, depending how bad you got wounded, you go home. Mm-hmm. It's not that I was in a hurry to go home, but it was there on the table, so I wanted to go home, versus going somewhere else. Right. And when they told us we were going somewhere else, it was really frustrating. It was really devastating. I mean, I was sad and I was in tears even. And then I was befriended by this staff sergeant who came and heard our story, and he made sure that we got home. He even made sure that we got a phone call. I never forget it. It was I think my phone call was a $300 phone call. You know, I got a chance to talk to my family and stuff like that.
After you were discharged from the hospital, you were sent home, and what was your reception like when you got there?
Well, considering where I grew up at, a lot of people didn't have, not only did they not have them, they couldn't afford cars. I know in my, you know, I mean, my wife didn't have a car. My sister had a car. And my wife because there was no room in the car, my wife didn't even meet me at the airport. There was my sister and my mother, and I think my niece picked me up at the airport. And I remember kissing the ground, and I remember finally getting home and getting settled. Came home, if we'd asked for help, I don't think at that time, if they offered me help, I don't think I would have accepted it. To this day, I don't think I would have accepted it. There were these approvals of things. I remember we had they gave us these letters to go get, if we were wounded, to go get to our local VAs to get, you know, checked out and stuff like that. And I went to Walter Reed, and they were taking blood, and I told them, but I don't know what you were taking blood for. There ain't nothing in there. It was a 151 or something like that. It was like we had this, it was like this new approval to do the things that, instead of trying to help us not do, it was just approval to do the things that would end up hurting us down the line. And I don't think that they foresaw it, but right. I think they gave us this approval. You know, I mean, a lot of us that had turned to alcohol and drugs and things like that, I think that was part of the approval. You know, and for years, you know, going to the VA for help and things like that, that existed. You know, I would say until in the last 10 or 15 years or 20 years, maybe, you know, they've stepped up and tried to, you know, reinforce helping us and stuff like that. But at that time, years ago, I felt it was okay, for example, you know, because I was one of those guys, you know. Mm-hmm. I felt it was okay, you know. And, you know, my family, you know, they never asked me questions about Vietnam. my mother asked me one question about Vietnam. That was a year before she died in 2001. So in 2000, the only question she had was, did any of your friends go to Vietnam with you? You know. Mm-hmm. So for 2 or 3 years, I searched for my buddies that I grew up with to ask them that question, and I finally found out that the guys that I grew up with during that time that went in the military, they were all a year older than me. So they mm-hmm. went to Germany. They ended up in Vietnam, but they went to Germany. They didn't go to, you know, we weren't drafted together. We didn't enlist together. So we had, you know, we all went separate paths for a while. Yeah.
Could you explain the events surrounding the assassination of Martin Luther King as you were in Washington, D.C. when this happened, and the tough position that you were put in during that situation?
Well, we were in my 4 days before Martin Luther King got killed. I think this is important for me to say. My best friend at the time was killed. And he was killed by some guys who were on drugs. You know, he was coming to pick me up, him and 2 other guys, and for no reason at all, they pulled in a gas station. This guy gets out the car and he shoots him. Mm-hmm. You know, he had never seen the guy before, didn't know anything about it, and this man had been to Vietnam for 12 months and never got a scratch. You know, and that affected me tremendously. And 4 days later, you know, my first wife and I, we were in the movies watching, I think it was the Planet of the Apes. And these guys came bursting into the theater, and I knew some of them because they belonged to this organization called Pride Incorporated that was started by Marion Barry, who ended up being the mayor of D.C. But they said that we're going to tear this theater up. And we asked why, and they said Martin Luther King was just killed. So we stood up and said, well, look, can we at least finish watching the movie? Well, we finished watching the movie, and I went home, and the phone rang, and it was like I had been stationed at Fort Meade, and they wanted me to come back to Fort, you know, and I had a feeling it had to do with riot duty, just automatically, because they were already rioting in the streets. Mm-hmm. And, you know, the first day I said, you know, told my family, tell them I ain't here. And the second day was like ultimatum, so one of my buddies picked me up, and we drove out to Fort Meade, and they told us that we were going on riot duty. But they also let us know where we were going to be. And they told me that I was going to be on the street corner where I lived. And I, you know, put up as much of a resistance to it as I could, you know, down to they were threatening me to put me in the stockade. It ended up, I ended up stationed on the corner that I grew up on, that I lived on, and here I am with a gun and tear gas, you know, prepared to tell my mother and my wife and my daughter and my sister that they can't come out in the streets. You know. I remember we slept in a laundromat, and we, you know, I always wondered why they never gave us a certain kind of credit, you know, or in the news media, but we weren't the 82nd Airborne, so, you know, you had to be the 82nd Airborne. It seemed like it to get this big, you know, headline across the news, but there was this little picture of me and a couple guys sleeping in the laundromat, right around the corner from where I lived at.
You took a vacation to Sacramento in 1973 and opted to move here permanently. Mm-hmm. Could you tell us a little bit about some of the creative outlets that help you deal with your PTSD when you got here?
Well, when I got here, one thing I'd always enjoyed doing, I'd always enjoyed taking pictures. So when I got here, I mean, I went around, I took pictures, and I started writing a lot of poetry. I even did a couple of poetry readings, and I used to do poetry on the Sac State radio station. You know, I painted before I left DC on, you know, canvases, and the biggest thing I could do at that time was I just bought a bunch of canvases, and I used to go down to the parks and stuff, and I'd paint, you know, a lot of abstract paintings and stuff, and that really helped me a lot. Between the poetry and the painting, those are my, you know, 2 biggest creative outlets. They still are. So
you're now part of several veterans associations. Could you tell us a little bit about your ongoing work with them and your special designation in 2009?
I belong to, I'm a past president. I was president for 3 years of the 27th Infantry Regiment Historical Society. I'm the current vice president of Vietnam Veterans America Chapter 500. Mm-hmm. I'm a second vice president in the 25th Infantry Division Association. And I belong to the Military Order of Purple Heart and the Disabled American Veterans and the Veterans of Foreign Wars. I don't do a lot with some of them, like per se, but I always feel that when I'm out there, I'm representing all of them. I mean, there's only so much any human being can do anyway. I go to Hawaii sometimes when I can. I go down there to try to support the soldiers, and I try to be there when they deploy and when they come home. I do all I can to help veterans and in the active duty when they get out of the military. In 2009, Vietnam Veterans of America Chapter 500 nominated me for Veteran of the Year for Dave Jones District 9, and I was Veteran of the Year for his district, which I consider a pretty good honor.
So you have a towel on your lap. Could you show us your towel and explain the story behind it?
In 2009, I was in Atlanta, and we were at a reunion, and two of the ladies there said that they would, one of these days, they were going to steal my towel and put it in an auction. So here's the towel, okay? And they said they were going to put it in an auction, and I said, if anybody's going to steal my towel, then it's going to have my name on it. So I had some towels made with my name and numbered, and they become like a special item amongst other Wolfhounds. Some Wolfhounds want them, but I know one is hanging in Schofield Barracks in the headquarters of one of the battalions. I think there were two left down there for that. I don't know if both of them are up yet, but it's become like a special item. People want it. People want to know where to get one. You know, I give them to special people. I mean, it's almost like, for me, it's like a personal. I have a couple things I do. It's a appreciation kind of thing, you know. And there's so many things that people do that you know, they aren't appreciated. You know, I have this little attitude about, you know, going places and seeing 100 people involved in something and see 3 people step up to the plate. But it's that person that when you ask 100 to step up to the plate, that doesn't get recognized. So sometimes the towel, you know, lets people know that they're appreciated.
So that concludes our time on Valley to Vietnam. I would like to thank William Easy Smith and say welcome home to you and all of our veterans. For Valley to Vietnam producer Jerry Ward, director James Scott, and I'm Christy Dentry. I would like to say farewell and look forward to joining you on the next episode of Valley to Vietnam.